Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of This Is Your Captain Speaking. Super excited to have on two guests today. This is the first time that we've ever done it with two, so this is going to be interesting. But let me welcome our guests, Kevan and Shannon. So Kevan and Shannon are founders of a branding agency called Bonfire. They focus on storytelling and marketing, specifically within the tech space and specifically within B2B brands, right? They come from a range of experience, having both met, from looking at both of your profiles, did you both met at Oyster? And they were both there early on in Oyster and grew that from zero up to multi-million. And since then, they've been each Kevin's been advising various marketing organizations on their marketing efforts, and Shannon has been the head of brand marketing at a company called Rattle as well. And they both founded Bonfire back in 2023. So great to have you both on today, guys. Really happy to have you.
Thanks, Andy. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Sure. Let's start with a little bit around Bonfire. So, like, where did the idea come from? How did it come about? And what do you guys do?
Yeah, I think it came from some of the experience that we shared together at Oyster. Like that was the first time Shannon and I had met, and that was um, 2 years ago or so now. And we just both had similar passions. We thought about work similarly. We thought about marketing similarly. We thought about the power of storytelling and branding similarly. And then we all like kind of experienced how that work is not very highly prioritized or valued or resourced in the way that we would hope it would be and could be and maybe should be in B2B marketing in particular. And so after leaving Oyster and kind of talking about what we wanted to do next, this idea kind of came to the forefront. Like how can we help increase the economic viability of storytelling and creativity and art? How can we give back to the people and the type of work that we love most? And Bonfire kind of was birthed out of that.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so, how long have you had Bonfire for? Since September of last year, right?
Yeah, we launched in September of last year, so it's only been about 6 months or so, which is really wild to think back on. We've done a lot in 6 months, but it's truly a continuation of the work that Kevin and I have been doing for the last like decade or so of our careers. And so while it's new, it doesn't feel that new.
Fair enough. So, how has it been those first couple of months? Because sometimes like I've started a business myself, right? And I think those first couple of months can either be like, oh, this is actually much better than what I thought it was going to be in terms of winning new business, keeping the lights on, right? That's also something that can be a bit of a challenge, right? How have the first, let's say, 6 months been? Has it been, have you been overwhelmed with the amount of work? Have you found that you've had to go out to market quite a bit to get in work? How has it been?
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it by saying it on a podcast, but it's been good. It's been better than we could have imagined. We haven't had to go and pound the pavement to find new business. We've had everything that we've taken up has come inbound organically for us, which has been, a privilege and a blessing. I think we can really credit like our networks and our friends and our connections to have supported us through this change. And I think that was like before jumping into this, I think we both knew that we would have the support of people around us, but didn't quite know what that might look like in practice when it came to bringing us business or leads or things like that. And then it's just been such a wonderful response from folks. And so I've been very relieved and great and grateful for what we've seen so far.
Excellent.
And
Tell us
it's
a little bit about the project. Sorry, Shannon, I jumped over you there. Maybe you could even answer this one, Shannon. Tell us a little bit about the projects that you guys are working on at the minute. So what did they entail typically?
Yeah, that's actually kind of what I was going to say is that because we haven't really gone out and been actively like sourcing business and we're getting a lot of things that come inbound, we have a really interesting diversity of projects and clients that come into us. So typically we're working with emerging or very early stage startups, people who are seed A, series B, maybe, who either have one marketer or a very small team of marketers, or maybe even no marketers at all, but they're just starting to understand that they need to begin laying foundations. And that's something that Kevin and I really love is the kind of brand, the foundational brand work that can set up a lot of future work for the team. And so we have several different retainer clients in different stages of growth and development, people who are looking to either evolve their brand that already exists to the next level of sophistication as they grow, and also people who are looking to do it like from scratch for the very first time. Also a recent client merging and acquiring another company who's like looking to, how do we combine these two brands? There's like the big brand question, but then that also has like implications like further down the funnel for like how those two products and teams go to market together. So it's kind of a range of things all over the place, which is really exciting. We also take on coaching clients who tend to be senior level brand marketers or heads of marketing who are maybe operating as a bit of a like one person band, who don't necessarily have collaborators or mentors or someone, as Kevan has been a head of marketing before. And so they're looking for support, mentorship, collaboration, people to bounce ideas off of. And so other than our like retainer clients, we also have the coaching clients to kind of round out our roster.
So basically, you're creating brands, regardless. So at any stage in the journey. So let's take, for example, the combination of two brands is essentially birthing a new one, right? Which is a nightmare. I've been involved in that process a few times. It's an absolute nightmare. I hate it, like, because you've got basically two different things that like stood separately for so long, and everybody has their own set of ideas of the world. That has one culture. This has another culture, which also has a big influence on brand, right? And basically what you're trying to say is everything that you've done over the past years, we sort of need to forget about that and build something new, which is a challenge, let's say. Tell us a little bit about like your process on building a brand. So where do you begin? Because it's such a monster of a task. So when I think of messaging, positioning, branding work, typically what I say to teams is like, because they normally get overwhelmed with it because it's so much. And it's like, okay, well, so the best way to knead an elephant is piece by piece, right? And it is an elephant of a project. So like, tell us what your process is. Where do you start? Like building a brand, what do you do?
Yeah, to take the elephant metaphor further, I'd say we have a plan for how you should eat an elephant, maybe is how we approach it. Like we have a game plan going. Sometimes it doesn't always go to plan, but our method starts with coming up with a brand story. And this might be thought of as a purpose or a vision. It goes by different names in different companies. But we often think of this as what is the best version of your brand and what is some cultural tension that exists out in the zeitgeist. And the intersection of those two ideas is framed as the reason why you exist. So it's your why statement. It is that big purpose. And it all kind of everything else stems from that purpose. And so if you're not clear on why you exist, if you're not clear on what you're addressing in the market today and how you're addressing it in the best way possible from your brand, then everything else that you do on the brand marketing side and brand strategy side, it just gets so much more difficult. And so we start with that foundation. From there, we're then able to build out additional messaging and stories and narratives and the whole like wheelhouse of things. But it's that first foundation. I don't know, Shannon, you want to explain kind of our narrative process, but I think that's something maybe somewhat unique to how we approach brand at Bonfire.
Yeah. Yeah, we've found that a lot of people either come into situations where the company already has a kind of mission or vision, or maybe even that brand story in place. But then there's this gap between the foundational and kind of like philosophical or maybe theoretical applications of the brand. And then like, how does this actually come to life? How does it actually express itself through channels, deliverables, actual touch points? And it's in that gap that we've developed a structure for brand narratives. So we define those as more focused, but still kind of general containers, stories that are around the category, the persona that you're selling to, your product or service, and then also the culture, like the Kevan mentioned, the cultural tension that you're speaking to, or maybe like the moment, something that you're capitalizing on in the culture. And you don't necessarily have to speak to all four of those things at the same time. You don't necessarily have to speak to all four of those things as frequently as one another. But we found that crafting stories around those four pillars is a really helpful way for people to imagine how they bring the larger brand story down to ground level and actually give that to your brand strategist, give that to your content marketer, give that to your growth marketer, to your PR team. And it's a way to make it a little bit more bite-sized, concrete, and real for people to take those and translate them into their actual work.
Yeah, I
So
think we've especially found that to be true, like in the B2B context. Sometimes in B2B
Yeah.
context, you say brand and it's like, oh, that's our logo, that's our colors, like we got that taken care of and things. But no, like we draw a lot of inspiration for B2B strategies from the B2C world. And I think we can learn a lot from how B2C operates from a brand and story and like resonance perspective with essentially their end users, our end users on B2B. And so that brand narrative framework owes a lot to how B2C companies tend to operate too.
Yeah, it's interesting in the B2B space, especially in tech, right? I think it's become much more prevalent now as well to help or to make yourself stand out more in terms of the feeling that you give people when they see your brand. So brand to me is your entire perception of the entity that is your company to the outside world, right? What's the emotions that people feel when they see your brand? And people say for B2B, people don't need to feel emotion. Well, people do because they buy based on emotion, right? So that comes down to like the very first touch point all the way through to how your website looks, how the people, if you go to an event, how people are appearing at the booth, how the booth looks, what the words that you're talking are, what is like, how do people approach, what's the type of personality of the company based on how the CEO is or whatever, right? And it's also like particularly prevalent at the minute in the tech space because I interesting enough, I'm gonna do a bit of a name drop here, but I had a conversation today with Scott Brinker, who you guys may know. Scott is the CEO of Cheap Martech, does that big landscape that has all of the different tech companies on it across sales and marketing. And in the past year, it's gone from 11,000 solutions up to 13,000 solutions, right? And that's just in 1 year, right? An additional 2,000 pieces of technology. Now, that's just technology that they've done the research on. There's probably even more, right? So for you guys, like in the branding world, how are you attacking that? Because like I work in numerous spaces myself within the tech space. Let's take, for example, marketing automation. In marketing automation, you've got everything from email service providers all the way down to like push notification tools to analytics tools. It's so bloody noisy. How do you come up with a brand that helps you stand out? Because there's like in the CDP space as an example, there's like 40 different vendors that all say and do the exact same thing. The product basically looks the same. How does brand play a role there in helping those companies stand out? And how do you build something that is different to the others, right?
Yeah, I think you kind of alluded to this, like it's very noisy out there. And so we often talk about like the signal versus the noise. And so yes, there's 13,000, MarTech solutions in the market, but I don't know, 12,000 of them are saying the same thing in the same way, and it all sounds the same. I think we've kind of gotten to this state of homogenization, whether that's because we've been super focused on efficiency over everything now, or it's like the rise of AI, and it's just like it's all kind of sounds the same. And so brand then is how you create that signal amidst all the noise. And I think we do that by going back to your purpose and your why statement. You do it by being really clear on the narrative that you're trying to get out there. And I think it's about having the belief in what brand can do. It's about having the belief and then the resourcing to go out and actually follow through on those commitments that you've made to the stories and narratives that you want to tell. For instance, when we were at Oyster, it's a global employment company, and so we're going up against the likes of Deal and Remote, and they have raised hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and they had kind of have their own their own whole universe out there in the market. And we raised plenty of money too, not to say we didn't have anything, but we had to differentiate against some very big players in the space. And you could see how that played out over the course of the 18 months that it was really competitive there. Deal kind of went more toward this like contractor play, Remote went more toward like a technology play. And then that let us at Oyster be more of like the human, people, authentic brand, social impact kind of play. And being true to yourself in that way helps you differentiate. It helps you kind of create that moment and that bookmark in someone's mind of like, oh yeah, I know Oyster as this thing and they're also great at global employment. You're building a bias for your brand so that when people are ready to choose, they choose you.
It's so funny because like I've been involved in this process like a number of times, and you've mentioned like in your process as well, getting a number of people involved in order to come up with mission, vision statement, etc. Who are you typically bringing into that conversation? Like you said, you have the process and you have your template. Who are you bringing in? How many people? Is there a stage where you have too many people that are maybe given a say in certain stages? I've had that before. And when do you stop with feedback as well? Because that's always a thing. Oh no, we need to go and change this part to say this, and this word needs to change that, etc. It can turn into a never-ending cycle of just feedback, and it sort of turns into like the Homer Simpson car, if you know what I mean. So you have so many people like wanting so many things, and I want every single feature and every single thing, and it turns into this thing that nobody actually likes at the end of the day because it's the Homer Simpson car, right? So the question is like, who do you bring in, when, and how many people?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And not to be annoying about it, but it definitely depends on the current state of your team, of your company. It depends on if this is an evolution of what already exists, then there may already be stakeholders who have an attachment that is likely emotional to what's been done before, especially when you're talking about these very sentimental things. And especially when you're talking about startups that are often founder led, and initial brands can be centered on a founder's vision, their ideas, their personality. There can be a lot of opinions in the room. And often those opinions are really core to the DNA of who the company is in the first place. And being founder led, or having the founder or the founding team's personality inform the brand, is actually another way to differentiate your brand. Kevin and I will generally advise that this process is either led by, ideally, the like brand team that you have, but with heavy input from founders and representatives from each of your like major disciplines. Product, certainly. Customer success is like another big one, or sales. Anyone who has like the most face time with your ideal customer is going to be really valuable to have in the room. And then I think, depending on who your customer is, if those personas exist at your company also. So for example, when Kevin and I worked at Oyster, that's our end user is primarily going to be someone in the HR or like people space. And so we wanted to get senior leaders from Oyster to weigh in, who worked in the people or HR space, to weigh in on our brand decisions, because they were the people that we're trying to target. And so it's really important to have a well-rounded group of stakeholders. But like you said, it can sometimes get out of control or unwieldy, or it will just go on forever. And the thing that I always try to impress upon like any team that I work with is, brand will, first of all, never make everyone happy. I've been involved in too many rebrands and new brands to think that there's like an ideal brand that everybody loves. It won't. And also, brand, it's okay for a brand to be, I don't want to say divisive, but for a brand to be a filter. And I think a lot of times when you're kind of like throwing everything in the kitchen sink, everything but the kitchen sink in on a brand, it's because people want it to appeal to the most people possible. They want it to be accessible to everyone possible. But actually, your brand should be a filter, and it's okay. And it's, in fact, the ideal state for someone to interact with your brand and think, oh, that's not for me. So part of the brand creation process is imagining who is your like anti-customer almost, or who is the wrong person, so that you're catering to and appealing more toward the right people. The most accessible isn't always the most successful.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm actually going to do something. This is going to be a shout out to you guys as well. I would always do this with a third party. I would never try to just manage this entire exercise internally, because you're too close to it. Like there's too much political bullshit internally as well, especially if you're dealing with founders and CEOs. You're going to be always going with, oh yeah, the founder said this, so we should probably do that. The founder's not always right, you know? And as well, you're in that case, typically founders or CEOs have probably been involved in the initial stages or earlier stages of a brand. So you're sort of calling their baby ugly a little bit. So it's like you should, like I always said, is work with an agency that has a process in place, and they are then going to be the ones that guide the entire piece, and they're able to look at it from a height, you know, and they're not connected to any of the political bullshit or who was involved and who came up with that word or how that looks or whatever, you know. So I would highly recommend that. And just on that, like we're coming right up on time now. We've I feel like we've still got so much more to discuss, but like, where can people find you guys? Where's the best place for you to be found?
Yeah, so our website is aroundthebonfire.com. You can also find our writing at aroundthebonfire.substack.com. We post a weekly newsletter with some of our big picture thoughts on creativity and branding and storytelling there as well. And then we're on all the social networks too.
Perfect. Perfect. Guys, thanks so much for your time. It's been really interesting speaking with you both. And yeah, all the best for continued success for the future for Bonfire.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Guys, this has been another episode of This Is Your Captain Speaking. Tune in again next week for some more great content. Thanks.